Greetings and welcome back to CS133 Practical Programming with Python. We're still in week 4. This is the SenseHat intro I was talking about. We all have a whole entire week on SenseHat, so I just really want to show you this with regards to, again, the import, right? So we already covered import, random numbers, and sleep, and how you import and what they are. Now we're going to understand really the SenseHat module and then interact a little bit with the sensors. The only sensors really kind of concept thing we're going to work with today is we're going to make stuff light up to kind of show you that, we don't have to keep using the print statement all the time. But at the end of this, you're going to connect, you're going to get the code to connect to the SenseHat. So those are some of the big pieces to this. But first, we're going to go over this. Is going to kind of be like a review, and then show you, remind you what it looks like without the SenseHat capabilities. And so again, this is just plain code, right? So num equals 10. And it's always create a variable, because what we're going to do is we're going to create a loop that loops that n times. So for I in range num, let's print the incrementer, print which is I, right? And then we're going to go ahead and do, so this is all we got, everything we went over, right? Our variables, our for statements, and then let's do a nice little if statement. If I is greater than 5, print your number is greater than 5. I'll just put greater than 5. So I have to do a bunch of typing. But if we run this, again, it's just going to print I, and then as soon as I gets greater than 5, it's going to print I and greater than 5, right? So 6 is greater than 5, 7 is greater than 5. All right, now let's have some fun and connect. And well, this is where we're going to do some explanation too. But let me go make this larger. So just like we learned before, right? From SenseHat, right? That is the module. SenseHat is the module. We want to import all of the SenseHat commands, right? The SenseHat command. Now this right here actually has a lot of its own commands, right? So this is why I said it. This one gets a little bit more complicated, but the concept is the same, right? You still need to grab the SenseHat, and then we're going to import all of the SenseHat commands, and then we'll import time to slow things down as needed. But that is the standard import statement, right? So grab the module, and then in this case, grab all of the SenseHat commands. And this is where things get different, is line 4, right? We didn't need to do that before, right? If we wanted to use sleep, if we imported sleep, we just use sleep. However, again, this is a whole bunch of commands. Again, it's a connection to this device over here, and I'm going to click this button over here so we can see it a little bit better. But this is replicating a Raspberry Pi with a SenseHat. So this is a little computer. For those that don't know, this is a little computer. And then this is a matrix, a LED matrix, so lights. It has a button on it, also like a joystick. You can go up and down, left and right. And then a bunch of sensors, heat, humidity, stuff like that, right? Temperature. That's the actual SenseHat that's attached to the top. These are, again, other adapters that the actual board. But you can see these pylons holding the SenseHat on top of it. So that is a SenseHat. So this, right, makes a connection to the SenseHat. So these, one thing important to think about too, these commands will only work on a Raspberry Pi. This is simulating the Raspberry Pi. Right? This is not a real one. This is simulating it. But these commands only work on a Raspberry Pi connected to this. But these commands have all the connections and everything needed to do that. So this is why this is a lot more complicated of a library. So what we need to do, and again, this is something where you don't need to memorize everything. This is kind of a point with a lot of this. But you do need to understand what's going on. So if you find this line of code and you find this line of code, you need to understand what's going on, right? It's taking all the SenseHat commands, right? All the SenseHat commands, and it's putting it into a variable S for you. So that way we can just use that S. So like the very first example, s.lowlight. So from all of the SenseHat commands and connections, we're going to find the low light command, and we're going to set it to true. Right? So therefore, this is not less of a command, more of a toggle, but concept is the same. So let's go ahead and look at something, because one thing you'll notice as we go through is we define this as S. When you're looking online, and you've probably seen this with other variables too, like if you copy and paste stuff from places, you need to make sure that you understand what they did. So again, we grabbed the SenseHat, we grabbed all the commands, we put it to S. Well, you can see this is already yellow because I made it yes, or I made it S, right? So it is important if you are grabbing commands from places, right, and then you grab from somewhere, paste it here, and they're like, it doesn't work. Well, it's because we called it S. Or again, if you copied this line of code from your own project from another site, and then this one from a different site, right, it was called S here, so therefore you need to use S the whole time, which we'll see in a second. So I'm going to uncomment this out, so I don't have to type it. Num equals 6. We'll use that later. Pink, all right. This is the RGB for pink. All right, this is the RGB for pink. This is important as we go forward, and it'll be a few weeks, but when we actually want to make colors show up on here, and this is also where we talked about random, right? I can make this a random number. I can make this a random number. I can make this a random number, and therefore I can make all these randoms. However, in this case, I can't actually because, look, I didn't import random. But do also notice that it put the parentheses around here, and we'll see kind of how this works in a little bit. But so pink equals this, right? If we want it red, it'd be red equals, again, we need our parentheses, 255, comma 0, comma 0, right? That's red. All right, I'm going to uncomment the next two lines. For I in range 6, right? Num is 6. We're going to go ahead and S, right? That's all of the SenseHat commands. We're going to use the show message command. Now this command takes a few parameters, right? So we went over functions already, right? So we know this is a command, this is a function. We're sending a parameter. We're going to send, basically what you send is what you want to show up. What do you want to show up? And then you don't, technically you could just stop there, but I want to change the color. Do notice that color is spelled wrong. It's because this program was written by the Brits. So you have to put it this way. And then I could, and this is why it's important to have why we're writing it this way, I could replace this, right? That's the whole point of a variable. I could put this, oops, I copied it right. Right, I could put it that way as well if I wanted to, but a lot of times it's easier, especially if you want to reuse it, which we'll see later. But again, it is this whole thing is put in there, so therefore I could replace it with that. And then remember, I is an integer, so therefore we need to change it to a string. Else, remember, it's expecting a string and then other parameters they can change it. There might be like scroll rate or something. This is where you can go to Google and you can do the SenseHat show message and see all the different options. But all we need to do for ours is we're sending a string and it's going to be pink. So let's go and run this. And we have 0, right? Because it starts at 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it should stop. And it's done, right? And if we want it to be red, we could change it to red and run it again. And now we get red. And we're just looping. So this is a lot more fun than printing, right? We can still print. It'll show up down here. But now we can actually send messages across. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of introduction to it, where we can actually see the stuff. But there's the two last things I want to show before we're done with this is the SenseHat page and the color picker, right? So how did I know it was pink? Well, I clicked over on a pinkish thing and then boom, right? I grabbed that, and that's not the exact color pink that was used, but you get the gist of it. that is how you could pick this color right here. And again, remember the parentheses, I highlight there. All right, the other one is, where did I get the SenseHat commands? I don't have the SenseHat commands memorized. Why do you think it looks like this? Why do you think it has import time saved into it? I didn't even use import time on our example because I copied these four lines, right? So that's something about as you're going through, you can see this. We're not going to go over this piece before, but what I want to show you now is this sensor piece. Oh, it should have already fixed that. So I stop this one, I run it again, and now it's doing the temperature, right? So this is another way to use this. Like toggling it to this, because I don't have one of these. These are really expensive. They actually have them on the space station, I believe. But if we want the temperature to go up, right, we can raise the temperature, lower the temperature. I guess you can kind of figure out what this app does. If we press the button, which I missed, in theory, I don't know, it's getting a little hard to press it. It'll toggle between the different things, and we can set these as well. But the bottom line is these are little toggleware things, so it represents what the actual temperature is. So you can see it's 87 degrees, so this program means it's mostly red because it tops out at 120. So, all right, that's how this program works. Well, why did I show this to you? Because what if we want to get the temperature? Do you know how to get the temperature? I mean, I've done this enough. I know how to get the temperature, but so let's look at our code, right? We have our SenseHat, and this is what I was talking about. Look at this. Now they use sense equals SenseHat, so they use a different thing. So when we go to try to figure out where they get the temperature, which conveniently, this is where they get the temperature, and this is like I didn't know that. I just looked at this code, I ran it, or looked at it, and I see sense, which is again this dot temp. That probably is the temp command, right? So this is probably getting the temp and it's setting it to a variable. So let's just go ahead and run over here, and I'm going to paste this above this. That was a nice spot, right? However, again, this is what I talk. This is a great example of if I run this code, right? I want to instead of I want to do the temp. Let's just bump this down to 2 for now. That doesn't work, right? Because I have it set to S. I have it set to S. So now when we run this, it'll grab the temperature. You're going to get probably a lot of decimals, so 19 degrees, a lot of decimals. This should run a few more times. All right, 19 again. Now, here's the thing. I can change it now. It's 69, well, it's 71 degrees. And of course, it's already done. So when I run this, right, it's going to say 71 degrees and point something. If I move it, it's as soon as it's done, right? As soon as this is done, that's when it gets the temperature. All right, so if I'm moving it, it's gonna, whatever the temperature is when it gets done with this line of code, right? Because it comes back up, it gets the temperature, and then it spits out that temperature the whole entire time, even if I'm moving it around. But that's not super relevant. You're not gonna use that quite off the bat, but it's something to understand later on when you're building your own SenseHat projects, if that's what you choose to do as a project. But that's it. That's how I get the temperature, right? S.temperature is the command. You notice there's no parentheses after this kind of, and you'll notice that there's no equal sign, right? It's not a toggle. So what you see with the SenseHat commands, all right, we have like settings. That's probably a better word, a setting. So low light is a setting, and I can set it to true or false. Temp, notice how there's no parentheses after it. But it gets the temperature, right? It gets the temperature. You don't set it. You don't set it because what this does, this gets the temperature. This, you have to set it, right? So if I just do light, it doesn't actually do anything. I need to set it. And then the last one we saw, which we saw actually, we saw second, is actually a function, right? It's a command. So when I do show message, I actually send something to it, and it executes something over here. So just in this little exercise, we've seen 3 different things with SenseHat. Settings, and getting something. So this actually gets it from there, and then this sends to it whatever we put in here with some settings after it. So that's about it for this. Again, remember we do have a whole entire week on SenseHats where we go into a little bit more details and actually try some little projects with it. That's all I have for this lesson, so we'll see you next lesson.